Do you remember those African-American breakfasts we forgot how to make? They once filled kitchens with warmth, butter, and love that stretched further than money could. When did we stop cooking the meals that made us feel whole? Salmon croquettes with grits were the kind of breakfast that made Sunday mornings feel special even when money was tight. Canned salmon was mixed with eggs, cornmeal, and onion, then shaped into patties and fried until the edges turned crisp and golden. The smell of sizzling fish filled the kitchen, mingling with the buttery aroma of grits bubbling on the stove. Each croquette was served hot, often topped with a sprinkle of pepper and a drizzle of hot sauce. It was simple but satisfying, a meal that carried the warmth of family and faith. Mothers made it by instinct, no recipe needed, just the memory of how their mothers had done it before them. Grits, soft and smooth, soaked up the flavor like a sponge, turning the meal into comfort on a plate. The sizzle of the pan and the clink of plates made a rhythm all their own, the sound of a kitchen alive with love. On Sunday mornings, when gospel music played low in the background, families gathered around to eat before church. It was more than breakfast. It was fellowship, tradition, and pride cooked golden brown. Buttermilk biscuits with cane syrup were soft clouds of comfort baked right into the morning. Mothers mixed flour and lard by hand, kneading until the dough felt just right. The smell of them rising in the oven was enough to wake the whole house. When they came out, golden and flaky, they were brushed with butter and split open to steam. Thick, dark cane syrup or honey dripped down the sides, pooling on chipped plates. Each bite was sweet and warm, the taste of simplicity done perfectly. No store-bought biscuit could ever compare. These biscuits carried the rhythm of tradition, the sound of a rolling pin, and the hum of gospel radio in the background. They were made from little yet gave everything. Families didn't need abundance, just a little flour, love, and faith in the oven. For those who grew up on them, biscuits weren't food. They were a feeling, one that never left you. Fried apples with cinnamon turned ordinary mornings into something golden. Apples were peeled, sliced, and tossed into a skillet of sizzling butter and sugar, the scent filling the air with warmth and memory. A dash of cinnamon brought comfort that felt like a hug. The edges of the apples caramelized into sweetness, soft inside but crisp at the tips. Served beside hot biscuits or bacon, they were a treat that tasted like home. Poor families made them year-round, using bruised apples that still had life left in them. It was the kind of food that made children run to the table, spoons clinking against plates. Fried apples taught that nothing good should go to waste. Every soft slice carried history, care, and joy in equal measure. It was breakfast made from patience, the sweetness of survival turned into comfort on a plate. Rice and raisins with butter and sugar was a breakfast of comfort and thrift, made for mornings when meat was scarce but love was plenty. Leftover rice from the night before was warmed on the stove with milk, sugar, and butter until creamy. A handful of raisins turned it into something special, a sweet, filling bowl that stuck to your ribs and soothed the soul. Children loved how the raisins puffed up and burst with sweetness, like tiny candies hidden in the soft rice. It was the taste of warmth on cold days, the smell of cinnamon drifting through the kitchen. For mothers, it was proof that leftovers could feed hearts as well as bellies. Bowls clattered, spoons scraped, and laughter filled the air. It was humble food that held power, the power to comfort, to fill, to bring a family together before the day began. Hoe cakes, or cornmeal pancakes, were the breakfast of working hands and early risers. Made from cornmeal, water, and a pinch of salt, they fried in bacon grease until the edges crisped up just right. The sizzle of batter hitting the pan was the morning's first music. Hoe cakes were tough and tender all at once, sturdy enough for farmhands, soft enough for children. They were eaten plain with syrup or crumbled into milk for those in a hurry. Every bite carried the taste of history, of generations who knew how to make plenty from little. Hoe cakes were survival food, yes, but they were also joy food. They told the story of hands that worked hard but never forgot the sweetness of life. Each golden cake was a quiet victory, proof that even struggle could be turned into something beautiful. The smell of frying cornmeal filled the kitchen, a sound and scent that wrapped around you like a morning hymn. Some families added sugar, others a dash of buttermilk, but all shared the same comfort of familiarity. Hoe cakes turned hard times into good memories, serving as a reminder that love and resilience rise from the simplest batter. Sausage gravy over biscuits was the kind of breakfast that stretched a little meat into a feast and wrapped it in love. Mothers knew how to make magic from scraps, browning bits of sausage or leftover drippings in a cast-iron skillet until the kitchen filled with the smell of salt, spice, and promise. A handful of flour came next, whisked in just right to soak up the grease, followed by milk poured slow and steady. The mixture thickened into velvet, bubbling softly as it turned from simple to sacred. Poured over hot biscuits, split open and steaming, it became a meal that could chase away hunger and bring comfort to tired hearts. The first spoonful was pure satisfaction, warm, peppery, and rich enough to make you forget how little went into it. It was breakfast made with patience, a recipe passed from hand to hand, heart to heart. That skillet of sausage gravy meant safety, care, and family. No one left the table hungry, and everyone knew they were loved. Molasses-drenched cornbread was poor man's luxury, the sweet miracle of thrift made beautiful. Leftover cornbread never went to waste. It was sliced or crumbled, soaked in molasses thick as tar, and warmed until every bite was soft and shining. The deep, smoky sweetness met the corn's salt and butter in perfect harmony. For families who had little, it was dessert, comfort, and memory all at once. Mothers made it by instinct, their hands moving with the wisdom of experience, no measurements needed. The scent of molasses melting into warm bread carried through the house like an embrace. It tasted of resilience, of laughter that found its way even into lean days. Some added milk or butter for richness, others ate it plain, spooning sweetness straight from the plate. It was proof that joy could be made from scarcity and that gratitude always found a way to rise, just like cornbread from an old cast-iron pan. Fried fatback and eggs were the morning anthem of Southern kitchens, loud, sizzling, and full of pride. Fatback, that humble strip of cured pork, hit the skillet with a crackle that meant business. The scent filled every corner of the house, sharp and smoky, waking families before the rooster even tried. Once crisp, the strips were lifted out and the eggs went right into the hot grease, their edges curling and browning to perfection. It was breakfast made for workers, for farmers and dreamers, for anyone facing a long day with an empty stomach. The salt and fat gave strength, while the golden yolks brought comfort. It wasn't elegant food, it was honest food. The kind that said, "You're alive, you're strong, now get to it." Every bite carried the rhythm of the South, hard work, faith, and flavor that could turn even a struggle into something satisfying. Homemade apple butter on toast was the taste of patience and the smell of love that never hurried. It began with baskets of apples, peeled, cored, and cooked slow over low fire until they turned deep brown and velvety. The stirring never stopped, hour after hour, until the mixture thickened into something smooth as memory itself. A spoonful spread over toast was all it took to turn an ordinary morning into something sacred. It was sweet, but not loud, subtle, warm, and familiar, like a quiet Sunday with family. Mothers filled jars with it in the fall, sealing them tight for the months when the trees went bare and fresh fruit was only a memory. When opened in winter, that first whiff carried the scent of sunlight and cinnamon, the echo of orchards and laughter. Children slathered it on toast while elders smiled, remembering the same taste from decades before. It was more than food. It was time preserved, proof that care could be tasted and love could be stored in glass. Each jar of apple butter wasn't just a pantry staple. It was a family heirloom in disguise, made to be shared, savored, and remembered. Hot rice cakes with sorghum syrup were thrift turned golden, the kind of breakfast that made virtue taste sweet. Leftover rice, too precious to throw away, was mixed with egg, a spoonful of flour, and a splash of milk until it became a thick, humble batter. Dropped onto a greased griddle, the cakes sizzled as they fried, crisping at the edges and puffing slightly in the center. When flipped, they browned to perfection, soft inside yet proud of their crunch. A drizzle of sorghum syrup, dark, earthy, and sweet as molasses, transformed them into something nearly elegant. The syrup clung to the ridges, pooling at the edges of the plate like liquid amber. For working families, it was proof that yesterday's rice could bring today's joy. It was cheap, filling, and full of heart. The kind of meal that made you thankful for leftovers. The aroma of frying rice cakes mixed with syrup filled the kitchen, wrapping it in warmth and memory. These cakes were a quiet nod to resourcefulness, the art of turning almost nothing into something beautiful. Country ham with red-eye gravy was the kind of breakfast that woke you up before the first bite. Thin slices of salty ham sizzled in a cast-iron skillet, the smell filling the whole house and tugging everyone toward the kitchen. Once the meat was done, coffee was poured straight into the drippings, creating a thin, smoky gravy that shimmered like bronze in the pan. That mix of salty and bitter, meaty and sharp, made for something unforgettable. Served with biscuits or grits, it was a meal that meant business, hearty, simple, and bold. For families who worked long days, this was energy on a plate. The taste was pure tradition, passed down from farm kitchens and country diners. Every bite told a story of early mornings, hard work, and the love that came from feeding people right. It wasn't fancy, but it was powerful in the way only real food can be. Sweet potato pancakes brought color and comfort to breakfast tables across generations. Leftover mashed sweet potatoes were mixed with flour, sugar, and a hint of nutmeg, then fried in butter until golden brown. The edges crisped up while the centers stayed soft and tender, the kind of texture that melted in your mouth. The smell of sweet potatoes and spice wrapped around the kitchen like a hug. These pancakes didn't need syrup to shine, though a drizzle of molasses or honey made them sing. They were rich without being heavy, sweet without being showy, and every forkful tasted like home. Black mothers made them by feel, not recipe, measuring by instinct and heart. They turned scraps from dinner into a breakfast feast, proving that creativity was the best ingredient of all. Served hot off the skillet, they were sunshine you could taste, warm, bright, and made with love. Butter-fried cornbread or hot water bread was the working man's breakfast. Fast, hearty, and pure Southern soul. Made with nothing more than cornmeal, salt, and boiling water, it came together in minutes, proof that good food doesn't have to be complicated. The batter was scooped by hand, shaped into patties, and laid gently into sizzling butter or bacon grease, where it hissed and popped like applause. The edges browned to perfection while the center stayed soft and dense, warm enough to melt the butter spread over it after frying. It could be eaten plain or dipped in cane syrup for sweetness, sometimes even served beside beans or eggs to stretch the meal. This was breakfast born from necessity but elevated by care, a golden patty that carried comfort in every bite. Families made it without measuring, guided only by memory and feel. The smell of cornmeal frying was the scent of survival, hope, and home. It was food for hard hands and humble hearts, and though it started as poverty cooking, it became tradition, something made not because you had to, but because you wanted to taste where you came from. Oatmeal with evaporated milk and brown sugar transformed something simple into something sacred. Oats simmered low and slow, thickening patiently in a pot that never left the stove's side. When ready, the steam rose in soft ribbons, carrying the scent of sweetness and comfort. A drizzle of creamy evaporated milk gave it richness, turning each spoonful velvety smooth, while brown sugar melted into swirls of caramel warmth. It was breakfast that hugged you back, a bowl of goodness that filled empty stomachs and softened hard mornings. Mothers stirred with steady hands, tasting and adjusting until it was just right. For children, it was sweetness before school. For adults, it was strength before work. It wasn't flashy or fancy, but it was full of love, the kind you could taste. On cold mornings, it kept families warm long before the sun rose high. Even decades later, one whiff of oats and sugar could bring back the sound of spoons clinking, the sight of a crowded table, and the memory of love poured straight from a tin of milk. Fried bologna sandwiches were breakfast gold, cheap, salty, and full of comfort. Thick-cut slices of bologna hit the skillet with a satisfying sizzle, curling at the edges like they were smiling back. The aroma of browned meat and melting fat filled the kitchen, wrapping around every corner like a promise. The slices were flipped until caramelized, the edges crispy and blistered, then stacked between soft white bread. Some added mustard for tang or ketchup for sweetness, others layered in a fried egg or a square of cheese, letting it melt into the meat. It was quick, easy, and deeply satisfying. Food that worked as hard as the people eating it. The grease soaked into the bread just right, and the sound of that first bite was pure satisfaction. Children devoured it before running out the door, while parents enjoyed theirs with hot coffee. Fried bologna sandwiches weren't just breakfast. They were proof that joy could come from the simplest skillet. Shrimp and grits brought the coast to the kitchen, turning humble ingredients into a dish worth remembering. Fresh or frozen shrimp were sautéed in butter with onions, garlic, and a little spice, then poured over steaming grits. The creamy base and savory topping came together like a song, smooth, salty, and rich. It was Sunday food, special but simple enough for anyone who knew the value of good seasoning. For families near the water, it was tradition. For those inland, it was aspiration on a plate. The smell of butter and shrimp carried through the house like a promise of joy. This was soul food in its finest form, made from what you had, perfected with love. Shrimp and grits weren't just breakfast. They were belonging, celebration, and pride, all spooned into one perfect bowl. Some families added bacon for extra depth, others threw in peppers or a dash of hot sauce, turning the dish into a reflection of their own roots. No matter how it was made, it always carried a taste of comfort and community. It was the kind of breakfast that made people linger a little longer at the table, talking, laughing, and remembering where they came from. Stewed prunes with sugar and cloves were the forgotten sweetness of frugal mornings. Dried prunes simmered in a pot of water, softening until they glistened like jewels. A spoon of sugar and a dash of clove turned them fragrant and tender, filling the room with a warm, spiced scent. They were spooned over toast, oats, or eaten alone as a gentle start to the day. Once considered medicine for the body, they became comfort for the heart. Poor families used them because they lasted forever and cost next to nothing, yet tasted like a treat. Each soft bite was nostalgia, a reminder of careful hands that made something lovely out of little. The deep purple syrup they left behind was poured over pancakes or biscuits so that nothing went to waste. This dish wasn't about indulgence. It was about intention, about turning patience and time into sweetness. For many, stewed prunes were a quiet memory of grandparents' kitchens, of simpler days when flavor came from the heart, not the store. Homemade butter rolls were what happened when breakfast met dessert. Soft yeast dough was rolled up and baked in a pan of creamy, buttery custard until puffed and golden. As they baked, the sauce thickened around the rolls, forming sweet, sticky edges that begged to be scraped with a spoon. The smell was pure heaven. Vanilla, butter, and warmth. Mothers made them on Sundays or special occasions, serving them hot from the oven when the whole family gathered. They were tender, rich, and full of love. Butter rolls were more than bread. They were joy you could eat, made with patience and pride. Every pan was a masterpiece of resourcefulness, made from the simplest ingredients: flour, sugar, milk, and faith. When they came out bubbling and brown, the whole house fell silent for a moment just to breathe in the scent. They were often shared with neighbors or saved for the preacher, a sweet gesture of community and care. Cornmeal mush with syrup was the original poor man's porridge, smooth, simple, and full of soul. Made from just cornmeal, water, and salt, it bubbled slowly on the stove until thick and creamy. Poured into bowls and topped with syrup or molasses, it became breakfast for families who knew how to turn little into plenty. Its sweetness cut through the warmth, making every spoonful taste like kindness. On cold mornings, it was more than food. It was comfort that started from the inside out. When the pot scraped empty, no one complained. They were warmed, filled, and grateful. The leftovers were poured into pans to cool, then sliced and fried the next day, crisp on the outside and soft within. Mothers called it making tomorrow's breakfast today, turning one meal into two without waste. It was a dish that required patience, love, and imagination, proof that survival could be sweet when shared around the table. For many, it tasted like endurance wrapped in grace, the kind of humble meal that carried families through the leanest winters and still managed to bring joy with every bite. Catfish and grits blended river cooking and Southern soul into one unforgettable morning ritual. The catfish, seasoned with salt, pepper, and cornmeal, sizzled in a cast-iron skillet until golden brown, filling the air with a smell that drew everyone to the kitchen. Its crust crackled as it came out of the pan, crisp and perfect. Beside it sat steaming grits, slow-cooked with butter and milk until smooth as silk. Together, they made a plate that spoke of hard work, heritage, and home. It was often the meal after a dawn fishing trip, where fathers cleaned the catch and mothers transformed it into breakfast magic. Some added lemon for brightness, others a splash of hot sauce for bite, but everyone agreed it was food that fed the heart as much as the body. The crunch of fish against the cream of grits was pure harmony, a song of the South in every bite. Catfish and grits weren't fancy. They were real, honest, and built on generations of hands that knew the worth of good food and a shared table. Leftover rice fried with eggs and onions was the taste of ingenuity, proof that nothing good ever went to waste. A pot of yesterday's rice, once plain and forgotten, became golden and flavorful with just a few simple touches. In a skillet slicked with grease, onions browned until sweet and fragrant before the rice was tossed in, sizzling as it hit the heat. Beaten eggs followed, binding everything together in a warm, savory tangle. Sometimes a scrap of meat joined the mix, a bit of ham, bacon, or sausage, turning the dish into something rich and filling. The smell of it cooking was comfort itself, the kind of scent that woke up sleepy eyes and lifted tired hearts. It was breakfast for working families, quick and hearty, ready in minutes. Mothers called it stretching what you had, but to children it was simply delicious. Every forkful tasted like resourcefulness and home, a small triumph born from yesterday's leftovers and today's love. Ham hock hash with potatoes was the quiet masterpiece of thrift, proof that waste had no place in a smart kitchen. The ham hocks, smoky and tender, were chopped into tiny pieces, their bits of meat still rich with flavor. They met diced potatoes and onions in a hot skillet, sizzling until golden brown and crisp. The smell was irresistible, earthy, savory, and just a little sweet from the caramelized onions. The sound of it frying was music to the morning, a reminder that even scraps could become something special. Every family had their own rhythm for making it. Some used the drippings from the ham, others added peppers or leftover gravy to stretch it further. Served hot, often with a fried egg perched on top, it was filling enough to keep hunger away all day. In every bite lived the story of survival and skill, of families who turned hardship into heritage. It wasn't just breakfast, it was pride on a plate. Stewed tomatoes over grits brought a burst of color and tang to the morning table, transforming something simple into something soulful. Ripe or canned tomatoes simmered low and slow with onions, butter, and a touch of sugar until the mixture turned thick, velvety, and full of life. The smell was inviting, a mix of sharp tomato and sweet onion softened by butter's richness. When poured over creamy, buttery grits, the sauce soaked in, creating a marriage of textures and flavors that felt like sunshine in a bowl. The dish was a favorite in households that prized flavor over fancy ingredients, a kind of poetry cooked from what was already on hand. For families who grew their own vegetables, stewed tomatoes were summer-saved in jars, opened on cold mornings to bring back warmth and memory. The slight acidity of the tomatoes cut through the richness of the grits, making each bite balanced and bright. It was cheap, filling, and nourishing, and no two batches ever tasted the same. Some added bacon grease for depth, others a pinch of red pepper for heat. but it always carried the same comforting soul. Stewed tomatoes over grits was proof that thrift, care, and creativity could feed both stomach and spirit. Homemade cane syrup butter was the southern spread of dreams, simple, golden, and almost too good to be real. Mothers whipped soft butter with thick, dark cane syrup until it turned glossy and light, blending smoky sweetness with creamy richness. It spread like silk across biscuits, pancakes, and cornbread, melting the moment it touched something warm. Each jar felt like a treasure, the kind of treat you made when there wasn't much to go around but love enough to make it sweet. The syrup carried hints of molasses and caramel, its depth of flavor born from slow boiling and patience. Families didn't need much. A spoonful turned an ordinary breakfast into something worth lingering over. Making it was an act of care, the rhythm of stirring as familiar as a hymn. Cane syrup butter sat on the table in mason jars, catching the light like honey, reminding everyone that joy could come from what you already had. It wasn't a luxury from a store. It was homemade elegance, a blend of memory, pride, and sweetness, spread thin but felt deeply. Corn fritters with powdered sugar were golden bits of happiness, crisp outside and tender inside. Sweet corn kernels were folded into a simple batter of flour, eggs, and milk, then dropped into sizzling oil. The kitchen filled with the scent of warmth and promise as they puffed up and browned, their edges curling slightly from the heat. Once lifted from the skillet, they were sprinkled with powdered sugar that melted just enough to glaze the tops. The contrast was perfect. Sweet meeting savory, soft meeting crunch. Families made them on weekends or holidays when everyone gathered around the stove to sneak the first fritter off the plate. For poor families, they were dessert and breakfast rolled into one, a small luxury born of thrift. Children's fingers grew sticky, their laughter filling the air as mothers smiled, knowing she'd made something special from almost nothing. Each bite carried the taste of care, of home, of joy fried golden and dusted in sweetness. Rice pudding for breakfast was the gentle song of a quiet morning, soft, creamy, and spiced with love. Leftover rice found its second life mixed with milk, sugar, and eggs, baked slow until it set into a silky custard that comforted from the inside out. A dusting of nutmeg or a drizzle of vanilla gave it warmth, and the scent filled the whole house long before the oven door opened. When it came out, steaming and golden at the edges, families gathered, spoons in hand, eager for that first bite. It was a dish of thrift turned luxury, humble ingredients made grand through patience and care. Some added raisins for sweetness, others topped it with cream, but every version tasted like belonging. Rice pudding carried memories of grandmother's kitchens, of mornings where love was the first thing served. It wasn't about indulgence. It was about gratitude, the quiet joy of making enough from what little there was and savoring every spoonful. Homemade pork sausage patties were morning treasures, rich and fragrant in the best way. Ground pork was seasoned with salt, sage, pepper, and sometimes a touch of red pepper flakes, shaped carefully into small rounds and fried in a cast-iron skillet until crisp on the edges. The smell alone could wake the whole house, the kind of smell that told everyone breakfast was ready. As they sizzled, the fat rendered down into a glossy gold, popping softly in rhythm with the morning sounds outside. The kitchen became warm, alive with anticipation. Each patty came out with just the right crust, tender in the middle and bursting with flavor. They were often served beside grits, scrambled eggs, or warm biscuits brushed with butter. Sometimes syrup was drizzled over the top for that sweet and savory perfection only Southern breakfasts could capture. Mothers made them with care, knowing they'd feed more than just hunger, they'd feed memory. They were Sunday staples, family favorites, and a symbol of home cooking done right. In every bite was the comfort of love, tradition, and a skillet passed through generations. Butter-browned toast with sugar and cinnamon turned the ordinary into something unforgettable. Slices of day-old bread were fried in butter until golden and crisp, the scent alone enough to make any morning brighter. A dusting of sugar and cinnamon melted into the warmth, forming a caramel-like layer that shimmered under the kitchen light. It was simple magic. No recipe, No fuss, just instinct and love. For children, it was a treat that felt like dessert before the day began. For mothers, it was a quick way to stretch breakfast when time and money were short. The toast crackled slightly when bitten, soft in the middle, sweet on the edges, and full of nostalgia. Some families served it with warm milk or cocoa, others enjoyed it on its own. Every bite was proof that simplicity, done right, could rival any fancy meal. It wasn't just toast, it was a memory baked in butter and kindness. Hot cocoa made from cocoa powder and evaporated milk was more than a drink. It was love in liquid form. There were no instant mixes or shortcuts, just cocoa powder whisked into sugar, milk and water over a patient flame. Mothers stood at the stove, stirring slowly so it would never scorch, their hands steady and sure. The result was a velvety, rich chocolate that hugged the soul. Evaporated milk gave it depth, a creamy warmth that lingered with every sip. On winter mornings, this was the kind of comfort that thawed both fingers and feelings. Children waited eagerly, faces glowing pink from the heat, their breath fogging up the mugs before the first sip. Sometimes a dash of cinnamon or a drop of vanilla was added, making each batch its own small masterpiece. It was a ritual as much as a recipe, a way to show care in the simplest form. Hot cocoa like that didn't just warm the body, it reminded you that home was right here. Cold biscuits with jam and fried chicken leftovers were the quiet glory of the southern morning after. Yesterday's biscuits, soft yet firm, were split open and smeared with sweet jam, strawberry, peach, apple, whatever had survived the holidays. Then came the crown, a leftover piece of fried chicken, cold from the icebox but still rich with flavor. Together, they made a sandwich that defied logic. Sweet, savory, crunchy, tender, all in one bite. It was breakfast without effort, made from gratitude and good sense. Families loved it because it stretched a feast one more day, turning Sunday's abundance into Monday's blessing. Around the table, no one complained about eating leftovers. They knew this was comfort food reborn. The jam glistened, the biscuit crumbled, and the chicken delivered that familiar, satisfying crunch. It wasn't fancy, but it was full of life and memory. Each bite whispered the same truth, that good food never really ends. It just finds new ways to be loved. Boiled peanuts and cornbread may not sound like a traditional breakfast, but in rural kitchens it was a regular pairing. Peanuts were boiled until soft and seasoned with salt, their briny flavor creating a hearty snack that doubled as a meal. Cornbread was baked fresh or left over from the night before, crumbled and eaten alongside the peanuts. The combination was salty, filling, and inexpensive, making it ideal for large families and farm workers. Boiled peanuts provided protein, while cornbread gave comfort and substance, ensuring that no one went hungry before heading out to work. This pairing reflected the way African American kitchens used what was abundant and turned it into something reliable. Children grew up eating it without question, while adults valued it for its practicality and taste. Though not common on today's breakfast tables, boiled peanuts and cornbread once stood as a symbol of resilience, thrift, and the creativity of turning humble foods into sustaining meals. Homemade sausage patties filled the house with a smell that felt like joy itself. Grandparents seasoned ground pork with sage, pepper, and salt, mixing it slow by hand. They shaped the meat into patties and laid them in a hot skillet, the sizzle echoing through the kitchen. The grease popped, the air thick with spice and smoke. Each patty browned perfectly, crisp on the edges, tender inside. Served beside biscuits or grits, they became the centerpiece of Christmas breakfast. The flavor was warm and full-bodied, carrying a balance of salt and heat that felt like comfort itself. These sausages didn't come from a store. They came from love, from knowledge passed down through generations. Families sat close, plates piled high, laughter ringing through the air. Homemade sausage patties weren't just breakfast, they were the sound and smell of home on Christmas morning. Corncob jelly was one of those miracles that made people smile at their own cleverness. When the corn was shucked and the cobs left behind, no one dared to throw them out. Those bear cobs went into a big pot of water, boiled until the water turned golden and sweet-smelling. Sugar and a little lemon juice got added next, then everything was strained until the liquid gleamed like honey. The result was a jelly that tasted faintly of corn, syrupy and light, the perfect spread for biscuits or toast. People used it when fruit was scarce, and it carried a quiet pride that came from turning scraps into sweetness. Grandparents remembered it from their childhood, when waste was not an option and imagination ruled the kitchen. Corncob jelly was proof that flavor could be coaxed out of what others might ignore. It was soft, shining, and made with patience. Those who tasted it never forgot that feeling of abundance born from scarcity. Each spoonful told the story of hands that worked hard, saved everything, and still found time to make something beautiful. Grits with fatback drippings were the South in a bowl, humble, salty, and deeply soulful. Grits themselves were plain, just ground corn and water. But when touched with the flavor of fatback or bacon grease, they came alive. The drippings added depth, the kind that made you close your eyes after the first bite. It was a breakfast made for hard work and long days. Cheap to make, but rich in satisfaction, it sat on tables from Mississippi to Carolina. Every spoonful carried the spirit of thrift turned into art. A little salt, a pat of butter, and the leftover drippings from a pan. That was all it took to make something unforgettable. Grits like these were grounding. They tasted of home, of struggle and pride cooked slow over flame. Each bowl told the same story, that good food did not need luxury, only love. Mothers stirred them before sunrise, fathers ate them before heading out to work, and children learned patience waiting for the first steaming bowl. Sometimes a piece of toast or a slice of cured meat sat beside it, but the grits themselves were the heart. They carried the warmth of the stove and the care of the hands that stirred them. It was not just breakfast, it was belonging. Catfish and grits turned holiday mornings into celebration. Grandparents cleaned and seasoned each fillet with salt, pepper, and cornmeal before lowering it gently into hot oil. The fish crackled and hissed, the air thick with the smell of golden perfection. Grits cooked slow beside it, creamy and patient, waiting for the fish to crown the bowl. A pat of butter melted on top, running down like sunshine. It was a meal that carried pride, a taste of the South at its finest. The crisp of the catfish met the smooth comfort of the grits, rich and humble all at once. Families gathered around the table, laughing, praying, and passing plates. It wasn't fancy, it was full. Every bite was gratitude, every crumb a memory. Catfish and grits were proof that simple food could carry the weight of joy, tradition, and love in equal measure. Lard cakes were the sweetheart of hard times, the kind of dessert that brought back joy when butter was a dream. Made from flour, sugar, and a scoop of lard saved from breakfast, they baked up soft and fragrant. The smell filled the house, buttery without butter, rich without cream. People called them poverty cakes, but they tasted like victory. The lard kept them moist for days, and a touch of spice or molasses made them taste like something from a bakery. Children licked the crumbs from their fingers, not caring that it came from the same jar used for frying eggs. Every family had their own version, some with raisins, some with cinnamon, each one proud and personal. Lard cakes were a reminder that sweetness was not about luxury, it was about invention. They were proof that love could rise from scarcity, baked golden in worn pans and shared without shame. In kitchens filled with laughter and thrift, lard cakes turned necessity into delight. Leftover biscuits with syrup were born from practicality, but remembered for their comfort. Yesterday's biscuits were never thrown away. That would have been waste, and waste had no place in a home that worked hard for every meal. Instead, they were warmed in pans or ovens, drizzled with cane syrup, molasses, or even honey if someone had been lucky. The sweetness seeped into the dry bread, reviving it into something soft and tender again. It was the taste of resourcefulness, the art of turning leftovers into love. Kids loved them because they felt like dessert before school. Elders loved them because they carried memory of mothers who made do, of mornings that began with gratitude instead of complaint. Every bite was sticky, warm, and honest. Syrup biscuits didn't just feed, they reminded families that nothing was too small to matter. Baked cinnamon apples and raisins brought Christmas mornings to life with a smell that felt like home. Grandparents sliced soft red apples, tossing them with butter, brown sugar, and a handful of raisins in an old baking dish. The oven worked slow, turning everything tender and golden, the edges bubbling with caramelized syrup. The scent of cinnamon filled every corner, warm and familiar. It was a dish that didn't need luxury, only love and patience. Served warm, it tasted like memory. Sweet, rich, and comforting in its simplicity. Children spooned it over biscuits or ate it plain, steam rising as they smiled through each bite. It was dessert for breakfast, comfort for cold mornings, and love disguised as thrift. Baked cinnamon apples and raisins reminded families that Christmas joy could come from the simplest things pulled from a pantry and shared with care. Ash cake bread was born out of fire and hunger, a recipe that came alive in the heart of hard times. Cornmeal, salt, and water were all it needed. The dough was pressed together by hand and buried right into the hot ashes of a wood fireplace. It baked slowly, the outside hardening into a smoky crust, while the inside stayed soft, golden, and warm. When it came out, people brushed away the ashes, broke it open, and drizzled it with syrup or molasses. It had a taste that was both sweet and earthy, like the memory of home on a Sunday morning. Ash cake bread was a working person's meal, something you could make after a long day without needing an oven or a fancy pan. It was food that did not waste or wait, made for those who had nothing extra but still found comfort in what little they had. The smell of it filled small cabins and quiet kitchens, the sound of the crackling fire mixing with laughter or prayer. Every crumb reminded people that strength could grow even from ashes. Cornmeal mush was the warmth of survival in a bowl. Made from ground corn and water, it bubbled slowly on the stove until thick and smooth, then was eaten with milk, syrup, or butter, whatever was on hand. It was plain, but never empty. Families who grew up on farms or in southern towns knew how far a bag of cornmeal could stretch. In the 1960s, it was breakfast, lunch, and sometimes dinner too. Hot in the morning, cold and fried by evening, it adapted to every need. The smell of it cooking was steady and soothing, a promise that nobody would go hungry that day. Children sat at wooden tables waiting for their portion, steam rising in the chill of early hours. It tasted like home, not sweet, not salty, just right. Cornmeal mush was more than food. It was proof that thrift could still carry dignity, that nourishment was as much about spirit as it was about stomach. Cabbage and ham hock stew was a breakfast that filled both stomachs and spirits. Cabbage, inexpensive and abundant, was simmered with ham hocks until tender and flavorful. The broth became rich with the smoky, salty essence of the ham, while the cabbage absorbed every bit of taste. Potatoes, onions, or other vegetables were sometimes added to stretch the stew further, making it both practical and hearty. Families ate it hot in the morning, ensuring they had enough fuel for long days in the fields or at work. The dish was economical, making use of inexpensive cuts of meat that might otherwise be overlooked. Yet it carried pride too, as it transformed humble ingredients into something comforting and sustaining. Cabbage and ham hock stew showed the ingenuity of African American cooks who knew how to bring depth of flavor from even the simplest foods. Though forgotten by many, it was once a breakfast that symbolized strength and tradition. Crumb-fried saltfish was proof that even the toughest cuts could be transformed with a little creativity. Saltfish was cheap and lasted forever, but it was hard and strong-flavored, needing love and time to make it shine. Families would soak it overnight, then roll it in crushed biscuit crumbs before frying it in a skillet until golden. The smell of it could draw neighbors from down the street, salty and rich with that perfect crisp edge. Paired with grits or boiled greens, it made breakfast feel like a celebration. The crumbs gave it crunch, the oil gave it warmth, and the memories gave it meaning. In every Southern kitchen, There was a version of this dish waiting to happen, handed down and reimagined through generations. Crumb-fried saltfish was not fancy food, it was pride disguised as thrift, a simple recipe that carried the power to feed both stomach and spirit. If these breakfasts warmed your heart, drop your favorite in the comments, like the video, and subscribe to keep the soul of old kitchens alive.